Testing interpretation channel 1212 test, testing English.
Okay, honorable members of the committee, this is the clerk speaking. I see a quorum here, and I must inform you that the clerk of the committee, myself, can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive at this point other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in the debate. First item of business, you know it, it's to proceed with the election of the chair. So pursuant to the standing orders, the chair must be a member of the government party. I'm now ready to receive motions for the chair.
Mr. Clerk, Brian May here. It would be my honor to nominate James Maloney for the chair.
Alors, nous avons Monsieur May qui vient.
Mr. May has nominated Mr. Maloney as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions?
Pas de main levée,
No raised hands. Is the committee willing to adopt the motion? Agreed?
Je déclare la motion.
Motion adopted. Mr. Maloney is duly elected chair of the committee. Congratulations, Mr. Maloney.
Before you take your chair, Mr. Chair, and make your welcoming speech, if it's the committee is willing to do so, then I will proceed with the election of both vice chairs, the first and second vice chair. Is that all right for everyone? Yes? So the first vice chair, as you know, pursuant to the standing orders, must belong to the official opposition. So I'm now ready to receive motions to that effect. Do we have any nominations for the position of first vice chair?
Yes, I have, Mr. Clerk. I will nominate Greg McLean to be the vice chair.
Okay. Alors, on a Monsieur Patzer qui...
Mr. Patzer has nominated Mr. McLean as first vice chair. Are there any other motions? Mr. Clerk, I'd like to name Mr. Mario Simard as first chair.
Vous êtes peut-être un peu de manière anticipée, c'est-à-dire que...
I think you are a little early. Mr. Simard will be eligible for the second vice chair. We are now on the first vice chair. So are there any other nomination motions for the position of first vice chair? I don't see any raised hands. Is the committee willing to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed. Mr. McLean has been duly elected first vice chair of the committee. Congratulations, Mr. McLean.
We'll now switch back to English. So last position to fill, second vice chair, as you know, pursuant to the standing orders of the House of Commons. This second vice chair must belong to the opposition, but from a party other than the official opposition. Do we have any nominations for this position, please? Monsieur Lefebvre.
Oui, Monsieur Greffier.
Mr. Lefebvre? Mr. Clerk, as I came in a little earlier, I'd like to once again name Mr. Simard as second vice chair. Mr. Lefebvre proposes Mr. As this position. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no raised hands, is the committee willing to adopt this motion? Agreed? The motion is adopted and Mr. Simard is duly elected second vice chair. Once again, congratulations, and I'll ask Mr. Maloney to assume the chair for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you to our clerk. Thank you, Mr. May, for nominating me, and thank you to all of you for the honor of allowing me to serve as chair of this committee. I've done it in the past, so I have some experience to bring to the table. Having said that, we're in a unique situation. I'm used to sitting around a table looking at all of you, as opposed to looking at all of you on the screen. So, although all of us have sat on different committees over the last several months, in this fashion. It's still a little bit unfamiliar territory. It's certainly unfamiliar territory for me sitting as chair. I want to also congratulate Mr. McLean and Mr. Simard. Should I falter, you're both there to catch me. I'm grateful for that. So thank you for taking on that role. Look, this committee over the last several years has a reputation for working incredibly well together across party lines. I was going to say cautiously, but I'm completely optimistic that we're going to be able to continue to do that. I know all of the members on the committee, and so I can say that with confidence. But I do thank you, and I look forward to the future in whatever form it may take. But bear with me as we move along through this electronic process. A couple of things. I'm going to, things move a little bit slower on Zoom than they do in person. For example, when there is a motion, or if you want to speak, you can raise your hand using the participants button, and there's a feature in there you can raise your hand or lower your hand. That will keep a running list of whoever wants to speak. I will keep an eye on that, as will our clerk. I also want to thank our clerk and our analysts who I've worked with in the past for all they are going to do for us. So on that note, we do need to establish what our agenda is going to be going forward. I know there's some routine motions we need to deal with, and I believe Mr. Sidhu, you were going to start with that process.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to the new chair and the vice chair. I wanted to read out some routine motions. Analyst services, that all the committee retain as needed in all the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist in its work. Are we going one by one?
Well, I think we need to do them one by one. So, okay, all in favor of that motion? Raise your hands on the screen. Rachel, we can't see you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you.
Pursuant to the order passed by the House governing the deliberations of this committee for the fall, it's either like you have the unanimous consent when you put a question, or it could be agreed on division, or if there are some dissent, then we need, unfortunately, to go to a recorded vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we were all in, there was no dissent on that one. Okay, thanks. All right.
Perfect then.
Thank you. Next routine motion, subcommittee on the agenda and procedure, that the subcommittee on the agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, namely the chair and 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Mr. Zimmer, did I see your hand? I know you're driving, so that's, thank you. Okay. That's unanimous. I don't want to take your hand off the wheel.
For the record, I'm not moving. So there you go.
Okay, good.
I'm in favor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sidhu.
Time for, meeting without a quorum, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence printed when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 1 member of the opposition and 1 member of the government. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
All in favor? Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I think I sent in an amendment to that is very similar, but it just says that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government.
Okay, I'm not sure I saw that, Mr. Cannings, but I think we can probably deal with that here. Does anybody? Do you want to read it as amended, Richard?
I think it's exact same words, but it says provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government. but and I forget what the actual wording was here, but when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Okay. Does anybody object to that? None. Okay, so all in favor then as amended? Okay, it's unanimous.
All right. Time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. That witnesses be given 10 minutes for their opening statement, that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses in the first round, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows: Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party. That for the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows: Conservative Party, 5 minutes, Liberal Party, 5 minutes, Conservative Party, 5 minutes, Liberal Party, 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes, New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Cannings?
Again, I sent in an amendment to that, and this is just so that, because usually when we proceed in this manner, the Bloc Québécois and the NDP never get to their 2.5 minutes. And just to add a bit of fairness to the procedure, my amendment, and this is the same amendment that was passed at PROC and Agriculture and other committees, so it has that precedent. So if the mother of committees, PROC, thinks it's okay, I'm hoping that you will find it. And that is just where it says subsequent rounds. So this is the second round. The order and time for questioning shall be as follows: Conservative Party, 5 minutes, Liberal Party, 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes, New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes, Conservative Party, 5 minutes, and Liberal Party, 5 minutes. So it just moves those Bloc Québécois and the NDP slots up after the first Conservative and Liberal rounds. So I hope that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. May.
Chair? I
Mr.
think
Smart,
that we
okay,
would
go next.
agree. I think we would agree with that amendment. The only stipulation would be that we would shorten the witness time from traditionally they'd have 10 minutes to provide an opening statement. If we could shorten that to 5 minutes, that would then make what Mr. Canning's proposing doable in terms of getting to those questions.
Okay, Mr. Simard's next, and then Mr. Cannings, and then Mr. Do you guys mind using the function on the screen? Then it's easier for me to keep track of the order. So, sorry, Mr. Simard, go ahead.
Oui, donc, moi j'appuierais la
I would support Mr. Canning's motion because it did happen when we were sitting in committee that block members couldn't ask questions from witnesses, but I don't think we should reduce the time that witnesses have. I think it is hard to have a talk about a presentation that would only be a 5-minute presentation, but I agree with Mr. Canning. I think it's more fair.
Mr. McLean.
Well, I was just going to say what Monsieur Simard said, that I think when we call witnesses, especially in normal times when they travel to Ottawa, I think it behooves us to give them at least 10 minutes to present their testimony. I think 10 minutes is a short time enough, and to cut it down to 5 for witnesses that may have quite a detailed presentation. And, if we cut it down to 5, then it doesn't make, it makes this moving up of our time slots, maybe we wouldn't need to do that. I would rather keep it at 10 and move our, little 2.5 minute slots up so that we get a chance to get a short snapper in before the rest of the round continues. So I'd appreciate just keeping it at 10 minutes and then moving the Bloc and NDP up. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Mr. McLean and then Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd understood that this had already been agreed to at PROC as far as changing the 10 minutes to 5 minutes, and then allowing the exact change we talked about, 2.5 minutes coming on the second round of questioning, coming in advance of where it had previously been, so from the other two opposition parties. Yeah, so that's I understand, a gentleman's agreement between the other parties at PROC. So it's, I think here we're supposed to just verify that at this. I mean, we can obviously do something different, but I thought it had already been agreed to as a gentleman's agreement between all the parties, that this was the new way going forward. In addition, they were talking about asking for 72 hours notice of the witnesses if they could provide something written where possible, so that 5 minutes could be better spent just quickly presenting their position that we should have examined a little ahead of time.
Thanks, Mr. McLean. Mr. May?
Yeah, and Mr. McLean basically mentioned what I was going to touch base on. My committee in Veterans Affairs, we've approved this change as well. Let's be frank, we are looking at dropping the Liberal slot down the list. And if you do the math, Mr. Canning, you got 2 witnesses, each with 10 minutes. We'll never get to that Liberal question. So the only way that I would support it is if we have of course, at the discretion of the chair, reduce the time to 10 minutes, or excuse me, reduce the time from 10 minutes down to 5.
Mr. Cannings.
Well, thanks for that. And I know the feeling about not getting to the question, because that's why we're proposing this. And I know that PROC changed the witness time to 5 minutes. Other committees have changed it to 7.5 as a bit of a compromise. I'd be happy with that. And if it, push came to shove, I would rather move our time slot up and have 5 minutes than not. But I think some recognition that witnesses should have a proper amount of time is important. So I would propose, a compromise of 7.5 minutes, if that might be okay with people, as has happened in other committees.
Thanks, Mr. Kangs. Richard, you and I have been doing this for 5 years now. I'm pretty accommodating. 10 minutes sometimes means 12 minutes, and 5 minutes could mean 7 minutes. I try to balance things out so that nobody is shortchanged or feels shortchanged. So maybe keep that in mind during this discussion. Mr. Lefebvre.
Thanks, James. But and on the same point that Mr. McLean and Mr. May said, and maybe just go back to the opening comments made by Mr. Cannings, that if PROC is the mother of all committees, basically we should be following what they're doing and not amending at this point, because not only, as Brian mentioned, that would certainly affect our position, would also affect the Conservatives as well, that they would have less time, when that's not what the agreement was in the first place. And I agree, but having done committee since 2016, that sorry, I'm getting feedback now. Oh, okay, it's better. Certainly, when the witnesses read from a testimony that we could have, or a paper that we could have received before, in advance, I think that we would be more productive as a committee, and because we should be going right into the questions and trying to get as much evidence or support or whatnot that we're trying to get from these witnesses, to obviously for the reports that we are preparing for the government. So that's why I think it's more productive for everybody. And I agree, the opposition, the NDP and the Bloc, would have a bit more time, and at the same time we're just being more effective, I think. So I believe that the compromise has been reached on most of the committees, and I think that what is being proposed by Mr. McLean and Mr. May, I'll be supporting as well.
Okay, Peter, you had your hand up and now it's down. I think you're.
Yeah, Chair, I was just going to, not being a member of this committee, just subbing today, but based on the discussion that I just heard, I would think that the 5 minutes, and at your discretion, if you find that, as you've said, that you have a witness that is compelling or needs that extra 30 seconds or minute, I am sure that you would you would give them that flexibility to be able to finish their comments.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I don't see anybody else with their hand up. So if I'm reading the screen properly, I think what we're doing now is we're voting on the motion proposed by Mr. Sidhu as amended by Mr. Cannings and Mr. May. Is that a fair summary of where we're at? Does anybody object to that? In other words, the time allocation will be 5 minutes for opening remarks, and the order will be changed as Mr. Cannings had proposed. Okay, so
if I may, Mr. Chair, I have also the addition, I think, by Mr. McLean of requesting the witnesses to provide with their speaking notes in 72 hours in advance, if possible.
yeah, I don't have any problem with that as long as it says if possible, because sometimes there's last minute changes because of cancellations and whatnot, and I don't want to be bound by a strict interpretation that prevents us from having a meeting. I see Mr. McLean nodding. So, okay, I'm okay with that. Does anybody object to that addition? No? Okay, so can we vote on that? All in favor of that motion as amended by Mr. Cannings, Mr. May, and Mr. McLean? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving right along, I think Mr. Weiler, you were going to take over from here, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Manny has a couple, Mininder has a couple more motions, and then I'll continue on French from there.
Okay, all right.
Got document distribution, that the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, and only when such documents exist in both official languages, and that witness be advised accordingly.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
Working meals. I don't know how many meals we're going to have, but that the clerk of the committee be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Does that include delivery? All in favor? Mr. McLean, I didn't see your hand. Ms. Harder, I can't see your at all. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, unanimous.
Go ahead, Patrick.
D'accord, je vais continuer en français. La prochaine.
I am going to continue in French. Then it's travel, accommodation, and living expenses of witnesses. That, if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization. And that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
La prochaine, c'est l'accès aux réunions.
Then access to in-camera meetings. That unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to have one staff member at an in-camera meeting, and that one additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
Unanimous. Thank you.
James.
Yep.
I don't know whether this would fit. I was trying to raise my hand there. And,
sorry, I didn't see that.
I have another, I don't know if this is an amendment to that. This is about in-camera meetings, and we discussed this before back in February. And I just wanted to bring it forward again, that about regarding in-camera meetings, that there should be added a clause that says any motion to go in camera shall be debatable and amendable, and that the committee may only meet in camera for the following purposes: to discuss administrative matters of the committee, to discuss the draft report, or for briefings concerning national security matters. And furthermore, minutes of in-camera meetings should reflect the results of all votes taken by the committee while in camera, including how each member voted when a recorded vote is requested.
Richard, remind me where we landed on this last time?
You know, it's completely blank in my mind as to where we landed, but I remember bringing it up, and we had quite a involved
Came up
discussion.
2 or 3 times, yeah.
So anyways, I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, thanks. Mr. May?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the clerk can maybe weigh in on whether or not that motion's in order. We had a similar question in our committee, and the piece that I'm concerned about is the very first thing you said about that these motions, motion to go in camera is debatable. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm by far, I'm not the expert, but I don't believe that is within the rules to change that. Wonder if maybe the clerk can, through you, Mr. Chair, if the clerk could respond.
Of course.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Sorry for the mixed message about that. If I answer directly your question, Mr. May, it's indeed against the regular practice and also the standing orders, because such motion usually at the House of Commons level and also in the committee's, let's say, universe, these types of motions are decided without any debate or amendment.
That's what I thought, yeah.
That being said, we need to be fair. Some committees have passed this type of motions, and with that special provision about that motion being debatable and amendable, you know, obviously Speaker Rota won't necessarily come and tell you that it's wrong. But on the other hand, if point blank your question is it contrary to the standing orders, the answer is yes. So this is unfortunately the mixed message I have to offer here.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comment on this? Mr. Zimmer?
Yeah. Well, normally committees are the masters of their own destiny. So this is where these, certain amendments or changes could be made by the committee in certain cases. So in this, I think what Brian and what it reflects is, instead of having a majority sort of party on committee, now the majority really is made up of other parties. So it really denotes that influence now, you could say, and it's up to each specific committee to make that decision, I would say, even though it's not part of the standing orders. But again, I would say the standing orders typically reflect a majority situation, so maybe this is why this is coming into play. I still think it's up to the committee to decide what it wants to do in this case.
Mr. May, and then Mr. Sidhu.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I'm the first to say that the committees are creatures, are their own masters of the way that they move forward. But I would just point out, Bob, that it swings both ways. If somebody moves a motion to go in camera, it's not just the government. It could be a member of the opposition as well. And I think the standing orders, like I said, are clear. What's not clear is that out of order motions have been accepted by committees, which yes, they have maybe made a precedent here, but I do want to point out that we'd be moving a motion that's not in order, I should say.
If I can just say something to that, James, I don't know the standing orders off by heart. I'm told by my staff that this isn't explicitly forbidden in the standing orders. So, but I'm willing to just leave that here for now, and I don't know if we can revisit it later. I don't want to tie up any more time, but
that's what I was going to suggest, Richard. Is maybe we just table this for now, and we can revisit
I think
it.
that's how it was left actually after the first meeting this spring.
It was, yeah, for at least one meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's do that then, and then we can deal with it next meeting, whenever that may be. Okay. So, Mr. Weiler, you were still on the floor.
Oui, je vais continuer avec la prochaine.
Yes, I'll move on to the next routine motion with respect to transcripts of in-camera meetings, that one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff.
Great, thank you. Unanimous.
La prochaine, c'est...
The next motion is notice of motion. That 48 hours notice, interpreted as 2 nights, shall be required for any substantive motion to be considered by the committee, unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, that B, the motion be distributed to members in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted, if it was received no later than the deadline hour, and that C, notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is traveling on official business, no substantive motions may be moved.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, carried, unanimous. Thank you.
Et le
The last motion is orders of reference from the House respecting bills. That, in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. Suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them.
Thanks. Mr. May, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sorry to interrupt this. I'm just getting text messages from a couple of different staff. As you all know, staff are having to listen in via telephone. I just wanted to let the technical folks know that they're having a really hard time. Apparently, the English phone number, they're getting the French translator, and I believe vice versa as well. Wondering if somebody could take a look at that, because the staff that are trying to listen in real time are having a hard time understanding.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yep.
I sent you a text message about that. We are told by our technical team that we will need to suspend to basically restart these phone lines properly. So maybe you can finish quickly with all the routine motions, and what I offer to you is to maybe suspend after that as a natural gap before proceedings with further deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So let's vote on the last routine motion then, and we'll do that. So all in favor? Richard, sorry, did you have your hand up? Did I miss that? Okay, great. All right, unanimous, carried. So let's suspend for until I get word from our clerk that we can resume without any difficulty.